talk about blending and spinning with Angora wool. So I'm going to give it a couple minutes for it to show up in the group and be able to be joinable. So I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit, even though there's no one in, because poor people, if anybody's watching the replay, I don't want you to have to wait for that. So here's a knitted sample of some Angora from my rabbits. I've got two different colors blended together, or knit together. We have this lovely, what they call in the Angora world, that's a blue, but it really looks like gray. And then here's I actually have a ruby-eyed white, which is essentially just an albino. So he gives me this lovely white wool. And I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but it gives this lovely fuzzy, what they call halo. So between the fact that it's super soft and it's got very unique qualities, it's a joy to spin with, but it's a little intimidating for a lot of people, and even at times still me. So first let's talk about why Angora. So it's 7 times warmer than sheep's wool, which can be amazing, especially if you're like me and you're always cold. And it's a very, very, very soft, very luxurious, and the fiber is actually, each of the little strands is actually hollow, and that's part of what gives it such the warm qualities that it has, and it helps trap that warmth next to your skin. The fiber is also flame resistant, which most wools are, and it's highly absorbable. It's feltable, and you can dye it. It's a little tricky to dye because it's hydrophobic. So it takes a little bit more to get it to dye, but once it does, it's very gorgeous. So there's a couple main types of Angoras, breeds. There's the English Angora, which is what most people think of when they think of Angora rabbits. If you saw my grooming demo, I raise Angora rabbits, so that's what I had. They are the charmers of the Angora family. They have lots of fur around their face and their ears, and they're very, very fluffy, just everywhere. Their feet are fluffy. The bottoms of their feet are fluffy. Sometimes they can get mistaken for tiny dogs or cats or something because of they don't have that stereotypical rabbit profile. It's very soft and silky. It's very fine. I've seen statistics of the micron count being finer than cashmere. So that's a consideration. They have very little guard hair, so that means most of the hair that you do get is that soft, desirable fluff. And English Angoras come in lots of colors, from the whites and to the blues, and there's all sorts of range. They are the smallest of the Angora breeds. They usually are around 5 to 7.5 pounds when full grown. So they're nice because they fit in standard cages or enclosures, and they're easy for the average person to have 1 or 2 for their own personal uses. So then there's the satin Angora, They're a standout for their lustrous coats. They have a very shiny coat. That's the name satin. They share a similar clean look with the French Angoras, which we'll talk about next, I believe. This breed has no wool. Like they've got hair obviously, but they're not the fluffy wool around their faces, their ears, and their front paws. So they look more similar to the traditional rabbit shape everybody's used to. The feel of its wool is really airy and less dense compared to some of the other breeds, which does mean it needs a little bit more grooming on a weekly basis and a little bit more attention. However, for a spinner with a bit of experience, the satin Angora's fiber is a delight to work with, and it gives a nice gleaming look to the fiber. And they are around 8 pounds when fully grown. And then there's the French Angora. It's a breed that brings the essence of like simplicity and elegance, and they're kind of unlike the English Angoras. The French Angoras have more of a streamlined appearance with their heads, faces, ears, and front paws have no wool. Again, having that similar rabbit shape that everybody's accustomed to. The French Angoras have a blend of guard hair and underwool, so it's a little bit more balanced, but you are going to find more guard hairs in the French Angora. For those that like us that like to spin it, their wool does combine really well, and it spins nice and smooth, and then it blooms afterwards when you wet finish it. They weigh about 8 to 10 pounds when fully mature and fully grown. And then there's the German Angoras. They are distinguished by their size and by their remarkable fiber production capabilities. They, per pound, probably produce the most. What sets the purebred apart from it is, you can tell it's a purebred German Angora by its white coat. If it's a different color other than white, you know it's blended or crossbred with another breed of Angora. The secret of their wool is their double undercoat, so they are very dense. They don't molt like the English Angoras do, so you can't pluck them. You have to actually shear them. But when you go to spin, their fibers lay a little bit more smoothly, so you don't get quite as much of that fuzz that you do from some of the other breeds. And the German Angoras are about 9 to 12 pounds fully grown. And last but not least, the giant Angora. They're the largest ones, and they are the ones famous for the production on a commercial scale. Because they are so large, and obviously surface area, they have the most hair, wool per animal, so they're the ones that most commercial growers use. They're known for their remarkably dense wool. Again, they don't molt either, so they're not pluckable. You have to actually shear them, and they reach about 20 pounds fully grown. They are usually white, and they're the ruby-eyed whites as well if they're purebred. So let's talk about the prepping for the prepping fiber for spinning. So unlike a lot of the other breeds and species, you don't actually have to prep their fiber if you don't want to. So this is literally straight off the rabbit, complete with a little bit of hay still. So you could spin directly from this, and I'm sure everybody has seen those videos where people spin directly from the rabbit itself. And that's one of the great things, especially if you keep up with your grooming, because the fiber will be pristine and clean coming right off the rabbit. So what you're going to want to do is, assuming you are getting your own and you haven't purchased it already processed, you're going to want to go through it and get rid of any second cuts if it was clipped, or any soiled pieces or vegetable matter, so that it is ready to spin. And that's pretty much, you could go straight from there. You want to keep prime, you know, so you're going to want to look at your fiber, and you're going to want to find the longer staple lengths. Don't throw away the smaller, like this little guy isn't going to get thrown away. I can either felt with it, or I can make a yarn specifically with all of the shorter lengths. It'll be a lot fuzzier of a yarn because it'll want to fly away, but it's still really usable. Especially you're going to want to make the best use of your fibers because they're a little bit more of an expensive fiber per ounce. You're going to want to check for any sort of knotting, matting, anything that you don't want in your end product, obviously. So once you have all the fibers sorted, you're going to want to fluff them up, which you're probably going to end up doing whilst sorting through it, but you're either going to have it stored or it's going to have been shipped to you, so a lot of times it gets compacted. You can either use combs or cards for getting it all airy and ready for action. Most folks lean towards carding, though with hand carders is probably your best bet. You can use a drum carder. You just have to be a little bit more careful with how you do it. And to fluff it up, you can honestly, if you're going to spend pure and not blend it, you can just hand pick it. Because if you have a swing picker or a box picker, you're not going to want to put this fine of fiber through it. It'll destroy your fiber. So hand picking is great. It's exactly what it sounds like. You just kind of pull it apart. And then once you get it in the lofty, less compacted, you're going to want to put it in something like a bowl or a basket or something, so it's ready to keep going. So it's also, because of how fine and frizzy it is, static is your enemy. So I have heard some people will spritz it with the slightest bit of water. I've actually even heard of people using Shoshin, spraying some of that on there and then let it dry before you try and work with it. And I've heard that helps keep the static off. I haven't tried it yet because I haven't spun in a while with my Angora. Or you can add just water with a touch of softener in it, but not fabric softener that you would do your laundry with. You're going to want to get a wool or fiber prep fabric softener. Unicorn Clean makes one. We sell one. I know there's other, like I'm sure Kookaburra and some of the other companies have one that's designed for conditioning wool. That's what you're going to want to get, not Downy or anything like that, because that'll do a number on your fiber. But if you put just a touch of that in a bottle of water and then just the lightest spritz, that'll keep the static down, which will help the carding, and it will keep it from sticking and frizzing and just making a giant mess. If you're going to spin a pure Angora yarn, then you're ready to go. Or if you'd like to blend it, then you can use, you want a high TPI. So if you use carders, you're going to want some that are designed for a finer fiber. Same thing with the drum carder. You're going to want to try and have as high of a TPI as you can. If you don't have a lot of equipment, you can even use dog slicker brushes to prep. Obviously not ideal, but sometimes, you make it work. This is when my kids help. I'm gonna use bunny ears here. When my kids help me, they get the dog slicker brushes because I can get these for $1 each at the dollar store. And if they destroy the teeth on them, I'm not gonna cry. So, why would you want to spin pure Angora versus why would you want to blend it? Well, one, it's a cost factor. Angora is typically anywhere from $8 to $15 an ounce. So, you typically spend a 4-ounce braid. Do the math. That's kind of an expensive 4 ounces. Also, Angora fiber doesn't have memory, and it when you're wearing a garment, it'll stretch out and it won't bounce back. It won't return to its original shape. So a lot of times, you know, people will blend with with a wool or whatnot to keep that, that memory and have a little bit more structure to it, because it's a very slinky yarn. I'm sure you can't tell just from the sample. Of course, it clings to everything. It's not a very lively yarn. It feels very, I don't know how to explain it, like dead almost. That's probably a horrible explanation, but it's what I've got. It's a very limp, loose fiber when spun into a yarn. So spinning it with something that's got a lot of crimp or structure in it, like a wool, will help that. So, you know, good things to blend it with: mohair. It adds softness, warmth, and durability. Because it's such a fine, thin micron fiber, it's going to break easier. It's going to be more prone to wear and tear and rubbing. So blending it to something that's more durable, you get the best of both worlds with that. Obviously wool, for the elasticity, it'll give you that return, that bounce, and it'll add strength to it as well. And, you know, if you really want to, you can actually use acrylic. Obviously not my preference, but, you know, you do what you got to do. It's cheaper than some of the other fibers, and it's a lot more easy. It's easier to care for. It lowers the risk of felting the garment or the item that you've made. Silk can also be added. Silk also doesn't have the best memory, so you're going to want to add, take that into consideration for the project, or add a combination of these fibers to get the best of their benefits. Personally, my favorite is a triple of wool, alpaca, and Angora. To me, I'm not a huge fan of a 100% Angora yarn feel, and some people I've heard complain that they've got a 100% Angora scarf or something, and it's just too warm, so it's kind of stifling. So once you've got it all prepped and you've decided what you're going to blend with, you can either blend incrementally on your hand carders, or you can put it through a drum carder, which I don't know if you can see that. You can put it through your drum carder, and you're not going to want to put it through the feed tray. You're going to want to feed it directly onto the drum, because of how fine and like misty it is. If you try and feed it through the card, it'll just kind of chill in your liquor end and not progress any further. So and then if you're going, there's a couple ways to blend it. You can either blend it by ounce, 2 ounces of each for a 50-50 blend, or you can kind of just blend it by look and feel. It's easier to recreate if you do weigh it out, and that's your best bet. You can get a simple kitchen scale. I always put like a basket or something and tear it out, and then add the fiber to it so it doesn't go everywhere, and I'll weigh it per ounce. That way I can, if I love it, or if a customer wants another one, I can recreate the blend. What else? So when spinning the Angora, the key is it's all about the twist, because it's such a fine fiber, and it's not a very crimpy wool, so you have to basically beat it into submission, or twist it into submission in this case. So you're going to want it fast and on a very high ratio. So basically as high as you can get on your wheel. You're going to get the speediest setting, and then don't shy away from cranking the tension up a notch. You're going to want a little resistance, or a little bit of pull to kind of help you. And then when you're treadling, you want to think energetic, almost like you're on a mission. Your wheel's got turbo, now's the time to engage it. a wheel that's a little bit more of a slower spin, you might not want to try 100% blend on a slower wheel or slower ratios. You might want to blend that with wool. And if you're aiming for a yarn that's got a bit of a backbone to it, so it's almost wire-like, which if you're spinning wool, you know that's the sign that you overspun for the most part. But when you do Angora, you're going to feel like you're overspinning it, but when you go to wet finish and wash it, it'll bloom, and it'll work out in the end. So once you've spun your yarn and plied it, you're going to want to alternate between cold and hot baths, and then thwack it either between your hands or against a table, or however you finish your yarn and kind of full it up. When you're spinning, if you haven't noticed by the fact that it's sticking on me, Angora sticks to everything, so you'll probably want to make sure you're wearing something that's not going to grab on what you're working with, especially if you're working with pure Angora in the cloud. Also, you want to try and spin the Angora when you're focusing on just what you're spinning, especially if you're new to it, because it does require a little bit more patience and concentration, especially spinning from the cloud, because if you don't draft delicately, or if you're not careful how you draft, you can be drafting 1 second and then all of a sudden you've got this big clump that goes off from your cloud. So not necessarily a Netflix and spin kind of project until you get a little bit more comfortable with it. And then it is a more difficult spin in my opinion. So if you are new to it and you're finding your yarns not coming out the way that you like, and it's a mess, give yourself some grace and practice. That's one of the biggest reasons why I recommend, especially if it's your first time spinning Angora, I recommend blending it with something. It's a lot more forgiving. You'll get a lot better success out of it. And worst case scenario, if you botch the entire batch, it's not as expensive as if you botched 100% Angora spin. So let's see, I think if there's anything else I need to cover. Oh, so after it's spun and in a garment, you're going to want to make sure that you wash in cold water and lay flat to dry. You can't hang your finished items to dry because, like I said, Angora doesn't really have memory. So if you let it hang dry, it'll stretch out, and that's how it is until you get it to relax again in water. And depending on how much of the Angora you have versus the wool, you might want to actually have it as a hand wash only garment, and you want to be very gentle with it. Not too much agitation and not too much heat, and because you could end up felting your finished item. Angora does shrink, so you're going to want to make sure you really wet finish your yarn really well before you start working on a project. And then once you have finished your project, you're going to want to really wet finish and block it well, so you can see what you're up against. And again, if you feel like it needs a little bit conditioning or it feels a little dried and brittle, I always recommend using a specific wool wash to wash your finished items and your yarns. And then if it's feeling a little dry and needs some TLC, get one of the fabric softeners that is designed for fibers and wools and animal hair. I've heard people have used conditioner and stuff like that. I wouldn't recommend it, but that's me. So other things to think about when dealing with Angora. Most Angora that you purchase in the United States comes from small independent growers like myself, but be wary of finished, like commercially spun finished yarns. Most of that Angora is coming from China, so the ethical and conditions that the rabbits are kept in are not necessarily guaranteed. So if that is a concern for you, you might want to purchase strictly from United States or more locally growers, so that you can ensure that you're getting ethically sourced fibers and the animals aren't getting mistreated for their fibers. All right, before we go any further, does anybody have any questions or anything that I missed that you would like me to cover? I'll give a second. Okay, I guess not. So either I covered it all or y'all just don't have any questions. All right, so let's take a quick look. I don't know if any of you were on with my live demo the other day where I was grooming one of my rabbits and he was ready for harvest. And I wanted to show you, obviously this has been compacted a little bit because it's been in a plastic bag. Normally I like to store my my Angora in either paper bags or cardboard boxes because they don't get as much of the static electricity from the bags. But if you look and see, this is one like shearing, basically one molting of my rabbit. So this is all you get once you get all the non-prime dirty wool, mats, whatever. This is about the extent of what you get for one rabbit out of 3 to 4 months of growth. So if you ever wonder why the fiber is as expensive as it is, this is one of the reasons why. I mean, for a small rabbit, that's a decent bit of hair, but at the same time, that's not a whole lot. Let me find where I put my scale, and I will wait. So this is about 1.5 ounces to 2 ounces of fiber. So, just so you know. Okay. So first what we're going to do is the hand cards. I'm going to assume that nobody knows how to card or drum card because I have to, because I don't know what people know and what they don't. So I'm going to be blending today with my Angora, and then I have some, this is Dorset. This is some of the, I try and source locally. So this is from a local grower, and we have it milled locally here in Ohio as well. So we're going to use some of this gorgeous dark brown Dorset. So you're going to want to always start, when you're blending, do a foundation of the other wools, because it'll come off your cards or your drum a lot easier. And then obviously you're going to, can you see that? Move that out of the way. So you're just going to load up your cards how you would for processing anything. And then you're going to add a layer of the Angora. And it's really easy to overload these cards, especially with the Angora. And then you're going to just go back and forth between the two. And my technique probably leaves a lot to be desired, but you get the general idea. And then you'll just go back and forth between the two. And then if you feel like it's going to change the color as well. So if you're blending for color, there's that. And then you can either just pull it off when you're done. Obviously this needs to be carded significantly more, but when you're done, you can either pull it off and then just kind of roll it up. And then it's kind of like a faux lag right there. And then you can spin it like this. Or you can get a dowel or a knitting needle and make an actual, more of a faux lag off of it that way. Or you can use a diz and diz off the hand cards. So you're going to want to put it through a couple different times to get it completely blended. because the Angora is going to want to act differently when you spin it than the wool. So if you have the two blended well together, it'll spin a lot more consistent, and you won't get those slubs where the Angora just runs away with you. And that's one of the other biggest problems I have with Angora. It's very slippery and very, I don't know, cloud-like, I guess. So it'll just grab it right out of your hand, and you know, you tend to spin it so fast that it's, you know, gone and out of your hand before you have much say. So but you also, you know, you want to blend it enough, but you also don't want to over blend it, because then you'll start getting neps, little knots and nets in your fiber. So if I see any neps forming, or I didn't process it very well, I will either assist it if it just needs a little bit more combing, or I will pick the bits out. That's one of the biggest advantages to using hand cards versus the drum carder, is because you kind of have a little bit more of a, pardon the pun, but hands-on processing. So once all that's good to go, again, you can full lag it, and you have a nice blended mass there, and it's going to be the best of both worlds, because you've got the strength and stability of that wool and the soft, fluffy airiness of the Angora. So this is ready to go, and then we'll take a look at doing it on the drum carder. Way, which unfortunately the side that my handle's on and the side that the pulley is on, it's going to be slightly difficult for you to see, but hopefully we can get her done. So again, you're gonna, even with the drum carder, you're gonna want to lay down a bed of wool first. I like to make sure that there's a good layer across the whole drum card. Let's hope that's, you can see. So the good thing about it being brown is you can see the whole thing. So I want to make sure that there's a thin layer across the whole thing, and that kind of serves as the barrier and the glue, because the wool will come off the drum carder and out of the teeth a lot easier than the Angora will. And the Angora is going to stick better to this wool being there first. So I don't like putting it through the feed tray, because I feel like it just basically sticks to the liquor in. It's still going to stick to the liquor in like crazy, because it is such a fine thing. But you kind of just have to persist and give it a little bit more love, and burnish it frequently, and that'll help. And speed on the carder is, you don't want to go too fast, because again, you're going to start developing neps. You want to try and not over card it. It's that you got to get in that Goldilocks. It's carded enough, but not too much. Again, I'm just kind of teasing it open, picking it open with my hands, because this has been in storage for a couple weeks. So making sure it's nice and loose, because it goes on a lot better when it's as a cloud, and if it's kind of clumpy, because then it'll clump right onto the wheel. And at this point, I am going to burnish. Okay, so I'm going to burnish to get that really in there. And burnishing it will also help encourage the, and of course the cat's going to come over and help. Burnishing it's going to help encourage the fibers that are on the liquor in to release and join the rest of the yarn, or the wool. And you're going to keep doing this until you have either, you know, if you've weighed it out to pre-measured quantities, then obviously you're going to keep doing this. You're going to want to alternate between the Angora and the wool, back and forth, in kind of, you know, lasagna style. And then you're going to probably want to put it through twice to get a complete blend. If you want it to be a cohesive amount throughout, or if you have it so you only have you know, like it currently is, I don't know if you can see that, you'll get a lot more texture to your yarn. It'll be art batty, because you'll get the different textures of the different fibers. So bear with me, I'm going to put a little bit more Angora on here before I add, okay, so I'm going to add a little bit more wool, and again this will help encourage that to come off the liquor in. The cat's got to supervise. And I've got a piece of vegetable matter. Okay. So again, you're going to burnish in between each layer. And if you still have stuff on the liquor in that's not coming off with the addition of wool, I kind of help it along. I'll grab it off the liquor in and kind of burnish it up against the big drum at the same time. And that kind of helps it along, which now you can't see because the kitty is in attack mode. Come here, kitty. Come see my dear. Okay, so if I were doing this for an actual yarn, I would keep adding more and more. But I'm going to go ahead and stop there, and of course I can't stop. Okay, I'll improvise. I'll just use a knitting needle. I can't find my tool. So then you're going to come across and release it. It's not for you though. Here, you can have that. There you go. And then because we did that wool bottom layer, it's coming off pretty well. It still needs a little bit of encouragement. But we're going to put it back through one more time, so I'm not too worried about the little pieces. Okay, and then you're going to split this back into sections. Ignore the cat, I'm destroying my table. So sections probably about half the width of your drum carder tray. And then you're going to open it up and thin it out a little bit, because when you're putting stuff through your drum carder and through a tray, you really want to be able to see straight through it so it's nice and airy and it doesn't overload your carder. So then we'll start feeding each of those opened up sections back through. And you're going to want to burnish in between each of the sections. And our final section. So you'll have to decide how many times you want to go through. Like I said, you don't want to go through too many times, but it depends on obviously the look that you're going for and the feel of the yarn that you're going for. But the more you put, like most wools and fibers, the more you put it through the drum carder, the more wear and tear you're putting on it. And a finer fiber like Angora, you're going to run into breakage and nets if you go crazy. But I'm gonna show you what twice through the carder looks like, and then I'm gonna put it through one more time because I'm wanting something that's a little bit more consistent throughout. And we're getting there, but we're not quite there. And this is a higher TPI card, so it really, really grabs onto the fiber. So you can see we're already starting to get a little bit more blended than it was, but it's still very visibly two different fibers. And if that's what you're going for, it's great. It makes a beautiful yarn, especially as lofty as it is. This is really good for some of the more textured styles of spins. So again, we're going to break it into thirds. And then open that fiber back up. And then put it through again. I also picked a very dark and very light fiber, so it's going to take a little bit more to blend those two colors regardless. So take that into consideration as well. And then there's still a little bit that wants to hang out on the liquor end. So I'm just kind of feeding those back into the drum. And I'm happy with where we're at. Again, it's all going to be personal preference, how much you want to blend, how many times you go through the carder, but I'm happy with this. I like the way that the wool and the Angora mingle, but not necessarily completely mix. I like it when they do that because, like I said, it gives a really nice quality to your finished yarn. And you get the halo, you get the luster of the Angora, and then you get the, so that's going to be it. So this is with 3 passes. Again, you can go more. I wouldn't go too many more because it's starting to want to nap up a little, but I think right there is good to go. So let me get this guy out of the way. Does anybody have any questions before I continue? Okay, so again, there's a bunch of different ways to spin a bat as well. So if you are not familiar with spinning from a bat, my favorite way to do it is to, again, just split it into strips. You could also diz it directly off the drum. So I'm gonna, about 2-inch sections is what I'm doing right now. And then because it is a wool and Angora blend, you're not going to have to put as high of a twist as if you would pure Angora. So this is ready to spin, and this is ready to spin. So like I said, my favorite is I like to do a wool alpaca Angora blend. Let me see if I can get this visible. Okay, bear with me because I'm in a little bit of an awkward position spinning, and not gonna lie, a little nervous spinning in front of people that spin. I'm almost entirely self-taught, so I like spinning. Of course, my battery's dead, isn't it? Oh, there we go. I prefer spinning on an e-spinner, especially for something that needs a lot of twist, because then I don't have to, act like I'm in the Tour de France and treadle like crazy. And also because I have a bad back and bad hips and bad knees and bad ankles. Just everything. It's just bad, the whole thing. So I prefer an e-spinner, but each their own. So you're gonna want it on a faster speed, a higher ratio. And I am going to be spinning on my Spinolution Firefly. Again, you could do this on anything, but I feel like an e-spinner makes it so much easier because you can just kind of crank it. And you're going to help, aren't you, Kitty? And the blend is going to spin almost identical as a regular wool. And don't try and attack the spinning wheel, Kitty. So it's going to, you'll still hit those, especially considering I didn't blend it to like equality. I just blended it until I felt comfortable that it was, close enough. So you'll still have a little bit of slubs from time to time, at least I do. I'm not the best spinner in the world, so I'll be honest with you. The one good thing too is you can get it fairly fine because of no, kitty. Nope. Because of the qualities of the fibers, and of course I'm gonna. Can you? Of course I'm gonna break it because of the cat. All right, but it still needs a little bit higher of a spin than 100% wool, in my opinion. And Kitty, you are have a death with. All right. Oh, Barbara, this is a Spinolution Firefly. It is Spinolution's e-wheel, and it's wonderful because it's all in one. You don't have a separate battery pack, you don't have a regulator, nothing. It's just this. And then you can use the pedal. It's got a pedal. It's kind of like a sewing machine. You can use that or not. So it can be 100% hands. And I love it because it's very portable. It's a little on the heavy side because it's solid wood, but it's solid wood. And also you can change out the flyer. It goes up to, I want to say 64 ounces is the flyer you can get for that, all the way down to 4 ounces. So it's really customizable, and I like it too because I can switch the flyers from this to my, I have a Monarch. I can switch the flyers back and forth depending on what I'm working on, and not have to have devoted flyers to each thing. So again, you're going to want to give it a lot of twist. More than you think that you would actually need. And I'm going to turn my tension down a little bit because it's trying to grab it from me a little too much. And then of course the cat's going to come over here. Hey Dylan, could you come get the cat? She's chewing on my wheel now. Apparently Dr. Mew wants to spin too. That's our kitty's name. It's Dr. Mew. She has not learned to be weary of spinny things yet. She about learned to hear, didn't she? All right. So hopefully cat-free, we can do this the right way. Nope, she's determined, aren't you? It's fine, honey. She's gonna keep coming back here. Yep. That'll learn you. All right, so you're gonna put a lot of twist into it. You can, it's great. It's a great long draw or supported long draw if you are into that or good at that. I am not the best at long draw, and the cat is making me excessively nervous. So you can get it pretty fine, or you can have it be a lot fluffier of a yarn. And with the way that we've prepared it between the two fibers, the way they interact is wonderful, in my opinion. And then I'm going to do this one section, and then we'll switch over to spinning pure Angora from the cloud, as it is called. But it's not as scary, I feel, once it's blended. And if it's something that you want to work your way up to 100% Angora, start with the blend and then progressively get less wool to more of your Angora, and just keep practicing until the point where, you know, you're at 80% Angora, 20% wool, and then keep going until you're 100% Angora, because that will give you the ability to practice with not quite as much. It's like training wheels, essentially. And you're not going to have to panic about wasting a lot of fiber or a lot of expensive fiber, because by blending it, you're lowering the dollars per ounce of the fiber. So again, when you're going from the cloud, you're going to want to make sure that it's been hand picked, or you can even card the cloud, but you don't need to. And I don't know about you, but my spinning time is precious. I don't want to waste it on unnecessary steps, but some people just like spinning from roll lags. They like spinning from something that's consistent, because spinning from the cloud is not consistent, because the fibers are going every which way. You'll have some it's a little bit more condensed and some that's just really airy. So you know, maybe if you're wanting to dive straight into 100%, carding it might be better, because then you'll get a little bit more of consistent quality, so it's a little less intimidating, a little less unpredictable, maybe. So hand-picked, and you want to make sure that you don't hand-pick it and then immediately put it in your hand and squish it, because I do that all the time, because I get all like antsy about it. So I only do a little bit at a time, which ends up being me stopping and starting a bit, but I feel like it does, it's a more consistent quality. So you're just going to draft from your fiber source hand, and you can, it's going to be a little bit slubby. It's naturally going to be slubby from this preparation, because it's really hard to draft consistently, but you can, there's, you know, you'll play with it, and there's little tricks that you can, you know, you can do, and then when you're applying it, you can either apply it back on itself, or apply it to something else, and that'll kind of help those slubs disappear. You can also, whilst applying, don't do it, they never learn, do they? Also, whilst applying, you can come through and kind of squash the slubs, kind of work them a little bit. But you're going to want your tension fairly loose on this, because it's going to try and grab it out of your hand, and you don't want it to, and you're going to need to spin it for a little bit longer than you would a wool, so you get that high twist. Because if you don't, and here's the thing, the biggest trick is, if you don't have a lot of twist, you're going to think you're over twisting it if you're new to it. It will just slink apart, and it won't stay a single for very long. So twist the crud out of it. And if your wheel, machine, whatever, is still pulling a little hard, it might be the time to cross thread it. And I'm assuming everybody knows what I mean by that. If not, you basically zigzag your yarn between the pegs or the hooks on your flyer head. And by having to go through multiple points and turns, it lowers the pull on your hand, which I would recommend doing with my wheel. I have the tension completely loosened up, but it's still grabbing it out of my hand a little bit more comfortably. a little bit quicker than I'm comfortable with. But, I mean, essentially that's it. So I don't know if you can see, there you go. Can you just kind of see that? It's a fairly fine spin that I'm doing. You can, the bigger you spin it, the more, like, or the thicker, the fatter, the more it's going to want to come apart again. So that's something that you're going to just kind of have to play with and get a feel for how much is too much, and how much makes it fall apart. So that's it. I think it's a little bit more intimidating than it is actually difficult. So, and so much of it's just, you know, like most things in spinning is you can be told how to do something all day long, but you have to kind of sit down and you have to feel it, and you have to make the mistakes, and you have to have it ripped out of your hand to go, okay, well that didn't work, let me try again. So I hate to say it, but it's one of those, you just kind of have to give it a shot and see how it goes. So that's basically all I have today. Does somebody have any questions?